Good afternoon. Welcome along to the very first Success Formula Lunch and Learn series for 2023. Today's topic is a really meaty one for the industry and something that I know a lot of health and safety managers, a lot of compliance managers, fleet managers struggle with. So we are really jumping straight into something that's very, very topical and particularly challenging kind of area around behaviours and culture, which is going beyond the policy, going beyond how you imagine the work should be done, what your policies and procedures say, and really jumping into the human side of compliance, what drives people's behaviour and what can you do about it to try and improve the compliance in your organisation. Thank you very much to those that have come along to today's webinar or listening to this recording. Fantastic to have you along, and look out for the follow-up email, which also will blog on our website, which will also have the dates of the upcoming monthly topics and links to register for those as well. All right, so I'll just jump into the slides now and bring those up on the screen for everybody. Excellent. All right. So first of all, what is compliance? What is this meaty topic that we're talking about? Well, at its really heart, it's about following the rules. And following the rules really goes back to the behavior and the culture. So words like how we behave, how we act, are we obeying, are we adhering? What non-compliance looks like on the flip side is slow adoption of policies or of rules, people creating workarounds, shortcuts, or different ways of doing things that isn't the way that's been laid out or instructed, flouting the rules completely, completely ignoring them and doing their own thing. And at the end of the day, non-compliance means risk. It means risk to your people, it means risk to your business, it creates safety risk, it creates reputational risk for your business, and at the end of the day, legislative risk, or there could be legal ramifications of non-compliance. So it is something that's really important to a successful business, and getting it right does matter. We recently did a poll on LinkedIn, and we just asked people, how hard do you find it to release new compliance policies or procedures and get action or uptake from your people immediately? And as you can see here on the screen, the majority of respondents said it's not fun, but it gets done. And what that tells me is that we'll be rolling out the policies and procedures, and we do give ourselves a big tick off as managers to say, yep, it's done. But that doesn't necessarily cover off on adoption. That doesn't mean that people are proficient at whatever the new process is. That doesn't mean they believe in it. Doesn't mean they adhere to it. It doesn't mean you've got compliance. It means you've rolled out a new policy. And so that cultural element of this is what we're going to talk about today. So what are the benefits of compliance? Well, as I said before, there are some real tangible business benefits. I guess it's the things that don't happen to you. But there's also some really significant upsides. So having compliance and consistency, everyone doing it the right same way, creates a lot of business efficiencies. It means that there's standardization, that things are delivered in a time-efficient way and the best way, presumably. It also means a consistent service to your customers, which is fantastic, and they know that they will get what they're expecting and what is legally compliant. And that might be around mass and dimension or load restraint, or it might be around policies for delivery processes and sign on glass, or photos of delivery, or whatever the compliance issue might be. The benefits of business, obviously meeting legal obligations is a really big one, and there could be some severe penalties for not doing that. Trust and reputation. So like I said, if you're giving consistent service to your customers, or to your those in your supply chain, they're able to trust you and know that when you say you're going to do something, that's the way it's done. Everyone in the business is bought into it and doing it the same way, and I think that's really important, not just for safety but also for your customers' efficiency and knowing that they can rely on you. it means that you get a great reputation, and that can enable you then to be in the running for preferred contracts or really profitable contracts. And then, of course, it reduces errors and risks. Errors create a massive amount of rework in business. And so when people are compliant and they are following and adhering to policies and procedures that you put out, it means that there aren't as many incidents, there aren't as many accidents. And at the end of the day, that actually also has a benefit to the individual, because it certainly saves wasted management time. So now, coming to what does it mean to the individual? If you think of yourself as a driver on the road, okay, just not a professional driver, but just a mum, dad, or somebody, a member of the public, there are a lot of rules around how we drive on the road. Wearing seatbelts, adhering to speed limits, giveaway rules, etc. So what's the benefits to us as an individual following those rules? Well, I've listed a few out here. So the first is that others around you know what to expect and then know how you're going to behave. And that can be really useful because, for example, you get new staff members on board, or a new driver on the road. When people are predictable, when you're able to understand that they're going to follow the policy and procedure, you know what to expect, and it means that there's no surprises. It also creates a stable environment. It means less conflict. It means that people feel safe, psychologically safe or physically safe. And it also means that you can trust your colleagues because they're all behaving in the same way, even when the boss isn't watching. And that goes to that trust and reputation, even for individuals. I certainly know with the clients that I work with, when they're looking for drivers or other staff members where they've got a reputation for being compliant, for being safe, those are the sought after staff members, because you can trust them, and they fit into the team and they create a great culture that influences other people around them. So there's a lot of benefits, I think, to being compliant. We often hear about the downside, the paperwork and the hard work, etc. But remembering the upsides is a good way of getting people focused on, yep, that's right. This is why this is important to the business or to me. So the third question to pose is, why don't we do it? Why are staff non-compliant or incompliant? The quote on the screen here, I think, is representative of what I hear from a lot of leaders, where anyone can get someone to do something by standing next to them. But the real test of leadership, the real test to the compliance of your systems, and the size of the gap between the work that is imagined, or the work in the policies and procedures, versus the work that's done, is when the manager turns away, when the person's out on the road, when they're in the yard, when they're with the client, and you're not there as monitoring that compliance or making sure that it's being done in the correct way. So the staff really need to feel it inside, an internal need to comply with what they know is right. They need to believe in it, and they need to make a choice to behave that way. First of all, they have to know what they're expected to do, but then they have to be willing and able to do it without someone standing over them. And that's a really important shift between, say, what in the success formula language we call traction. In the early low safety maturity is when people follow the rules because someone's watching them, versus when people follow the rules because they know it's the right thing to do. And then when you step up to the next level again, when the team hold each other accountable and encourage each other to be compliant. So as I said, just referencing those traction gears, this here is the model that we use to measure how compliant or how mature a business is in terms of their safety culture. And as I said, this lower level is managed. We're really making sure that people are doing the right thing, versus the higher level when they're wanting to do the right thing. There's also consistency, and they're taking ownership for their own action, but each other's action. And at this higher level, when you start to get to that level of safety culture, there is so many more of those business benefits, and you can start to focus shift your energy and your effort on rework or incidents or managing compliance, and focus on productivity, innovation, growing the business, developing your people, all the other business priorities that a really good operation would have. So there's some real benefit to how and where you were able to spend your time. So we've given here 7 strategies for compliance. Those of you that may have seen the blog that we put out a couple of weeks ago talked about these strategies, but I want to go into each of these 7 areas in a little more detail today so that we can talk about not only what, the idea and principle, but what can you do today? What can you take away from this webinar and take back into your workplace and implement straight away that you're able to start to see a benefit and a lift in that compliance culture? So let's tackle number 1, which is training and education. When we talked before about why people being compliant when the boss is watching, the first thing really is about setting very clear expectations. It's about defining what you actually want people to do. Now, if they can't find the policy, if they've never been told what it is, if they can't understand the policy or the procedure, if it's disorganized and the information's all over the place, then it's really difficult for anyone to, even with all the goodwill in the world, to actually be compliant. So the first step really is making those expectations clear, making the policy clear, so that everyone knows what's expected of them. And one of the ways you can do that is through training. Some businesses will print the policies, and when someone comes or have them available on the internet, and when a new employee starts, they'll get them to read those policies and then sign off and say that they've been read. But really, with what we know now about training and particularly in transport and logistics, where people are reading and writing is not necessarily a strength. There's lots and lots of other ways that you can do training or get those expectations across. So some of the techniques that I've seen work really well is the use of diagrams or videos. So even just taking something as simple as your mobile phone and going out and taking a video of your site markings, or taking a video of somebody doing a procedure the correct way and you narrating it by talking over it. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be fancy, but tools like that are a much better way of explaining a policy or procedure to someone and showing them how to be compliant than just getting them to read a piece of paper. One of the other really cool techniques with training is actually doing it. So a good example would be when you're looking at load restraint, or the way that you're using straps or restraints, is actually going out and doing it with someone, or taking them where to demonstrate where somebody else has done it correctly and say, hey, let's have a look at this. Let's see why this is compliant. Let's point out that, all the things that you need to be looking for or thinking about. So I guess what I'm saying there is, with the training and education piece, please remember there are lots and lots of different ways that can be done. It can be a little bit more time consuming, but the time invested is really worth it if that information sinks into someone's brain and actually, enables them to be compliant, as opposed to just reading a boring old piece of paper that, to be honest, often goes in one ear and out the other. The other thing is, if you are using written documents, a simple little tip: use headings and subheadings, use bullet pointed lists. Try to keep your language short and concise and really clear. I read somewhere the other day that with your induction material, it should be written to sort of the age of someone about 14 or 15, and that's not to say that people are to dumb it down or to make it stupid, but it's to enable those that, for example, don't have English as a first language, don't have the writing and reading skills. Just make it accessible so that everyone is able to understand that information. Fancy language doesn't have a place in explaining things that you need people to be really compliant with, because it's critical that they actually understand. And yeah, using pictures is another great tool. I've seen a lot of people, rather than listing the PPE rules, they have a picture of a person that says, to be compliant, this is what you need to look like before you leave the depot. Have you got this, this, and this? Much more effective technique of explaining the expectations and what it takes to be compliant than, say, a written list or a piece of paper. Right, so moving on now. Just one other point on the training and education. Not everyone will get it at the same pace. So if you do find that you've got non-compliance in an area, one of the great ways that you can address that is with further education. It may be that you weren't clear about the expectations, or that person didn't understand, and that's okay. We all get things at our own pace, and it's just worth realizing that training isn't a one shot and you're done. Some people need a little bit of extra support or coaching or help to understand. And then also we forget, and particularly if it's not a task that you do regularly, it's worth revisiting, say, in your toolboxes and posters or communication that you put out there. If you want people to remain compliant over time and avoid complacency, it's important that you give them regular reminders and regular reinforcement and keep it really visible in everything that you're doing. So number 2, robust monitoring systems. The first thing I would say is for managers out there to get real. The data from the Traction program, where we measure safety culture for a business and help them get insight into how big the gap is between what they think and what's really happening, and get the feedback from the staff, generally tells us that the management view is 20% more optimistic than what the staff are saying. Now, that can be for a range of reasons. It might be that you are more aware of the expectations and what it takes to be compliant. Might be that you're more across initiatives that you've got in place to improve compliance. But frequently it's because there's stuff going out there in and around the business that you're not fully across. Your robust monitoring system can be things like things that you can measure, such as inspecting a certain number of loads, or safety observations, walking the yard, maintenance records, a range of things. But one of the best ways for monitoring is to actually get out there on the ground with your people, talking to your people, trying to pay attention. What a robust monitoring system gives you is a way of nipping things in the bud. As soon as you find a problem, you're able to do something about it. I've seen some businesses where they just hope for the best. They go, oh yeah, I know there's an issue there, but I'm just hoping that it goes away. And unfortunately, that almost never works. So the quicker you can nip things in the bud, I think the better. We talk about non-compliance as being infectious, and where there's things that are not going well in the business, or policies and procedures that aren't being followed, and nobody cares, that tends to impact the whole team and bring the standard of the whole team down. So if you could pull someone up where there's a non-compliance, really early on, and say, hey, look, you're probably already aware of this, but let's just recap on what it takes to be compliant. I know that you're going to do the right thing. Let me just run through that with you again. Here's what the expectation is. You're able to give people a little bit of grace, and hopefully demonstrate that this is important. I do care. The business does care. This is the expectation. This is the standard that we're all going to be coming to. And that's where audits can be really helpful for your business as well. So number 3 is about the culture of safety, and that really links into what I was saying before about nipping things in the bud. You really want your whole team to be on the same page and encouraging each other to be compliant. That might mean, particularly if you are starting at a low bar, putting in place incentives and rewards. Now, I have heard some pushback on this, where managers saying to me, oh, I'm not going to give them a reward for just showing up and doing their job, right? But actually, what we know is where people are rewarded for something that becomes a habit, that becomes the behavior that they continue. And so it might be a case of rewarding depots or teams or individuals who are compliant. And a classic example of that is using your telematics data to reward drivers who have excellent driving behaviour. Really, you're rewarding compliance, right? Which is no speed infringements or events, not having distraction events, those types of things. So something to consider. We are going to do a future one of these webinars on how to roll out incentive schemes. So I won't cover all of that now, but just punishing people isn't necessarily the way to go. I think it's important that there's also an incentive or a reward for those that are doing a good job, and that can influence the behaviours of others and bring them up to the standard that you're expecting. The other thing is encouraging compliance is the job of all of the leaders in your business. We talk frequently about role modelling and how that's really important, but nothing will kill the compliance culture in your business faster than someone saying, oh, here's this dumb rule we have to follow, and it's really dumb, but we all got to get on board with it. That does not inspire confidence in your team, and that's why it's really important that compliance goes outside your fleet manager, your health and safety manager, your HR team, whatever, and it's actually everybody's job. We're all responsible for it, and all the leaders in your business have to set the tone and lead by example. And that leading has to be consistent. If one day they go, no, back off today, and next day, the Jekyll and Hyde thing, then people don't know where they stand, and they don't build trust in their leaders. So if you really want your team to be compliant, even when no one's looking, make sure that they are seeing you doing what you say you're going to do, and leading from the front. Look, just one of the other things there about setting the tone. Consistency is really, really key to building psychological trust. Again, a topic we might cover in the future sessions if there's enough interest. But building that culture of safety, that your leader, your staff knowing where they stand with their leaders is really critical. And a good example of that is whether the non-compliance. If you fly off the handle and it's all about blaming people and pointing fingers, you start to drive things underground, and people will hide their mistakes or hide the fact that they don't understand something or they don't know what's expected of them. So when you're building that culture of safety, yes, it needs to be holding people to account and picking it up when there's non-compliance. But I encourage you to do that in a way that's about being fair, listening and asking questions before you jump to conclusions, gathering your evidence, making sure that you're calm when you're addressing the non-compliance issues, etc. Because nothing will destroy that trust that the team have in you faster than that flying off the handle or handling that non-compliance really badly. Look, and that leads us to the next topic, which is communication. So one of the good ways that you can understand and address any areas of non-compliance is by communicating with your team, making opportunities where they can challenge you and where they can ask questions. Communication is as much about listening as it is about talking. The old adage, we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth, use them in that proportion. But yeah, in order to make those opportunities, it's things like walking around the yard, talking to people, when they're loaded, or rather not distracting them from the task, but, when they're having some downtime or when they're out on the job, asking them, hey, why did you do it that way? Or do you think there's a better way that we can do this? Or, were you aware that this is actually the law and we're following, we're having to do this to meet our obligations? And then getting their feedback on things as you go. I remember a story from a large energy company that had a really fantastic safety record, and their health and safety manager said to me, one of the best things that my guys ever come and tell me is, hey, Mary, I found a workaround. I found a shortcut. Now, if you think about the gap between the work imagined, the work done, the policy versus what's happening on the ground, the people on the ground or on the job know those tasks the best. if they're able to identify an opportunity to do it smarter, do it more efficiently, do it better, that's something that you really, really want to hear about, because it may create an innovation opportunity that you can share with the rest of the business. I don't advocate for people going off piece and all doing it willy-nilly their own way, because that lack of standardization will destroy the efficiency in your business. It will make it very difficult to judge compliance and very difficult to train new people. But if there is a workaround and they're communicating and sharing that feedback with you, that's a really good opportunity to look for a way to improve. All right, next one is being proactive. So look, this is about keeping on top of changes that happen. The laws that govern the way that we run our transport logistics businesses and all the different forms, whether that be the environmental stuff or the HR considerations or the way we load, or the maintenance, whatever it might be, regularly change. And so making sure that it's someone's job in the business to continually stay updated and on top of what do we need to be doing, what the expectations of us. It can be really useful to read the improvement notices that are put out by our regulators, because that generally gives an indication or a guide of what they're looking for and what they believe compliance to be, and if there has been any changes. And you can do that by following them on LinkedIn, or usually logging into the website and signing up for their newsletters or their notifications. And then really the final one is about reviewing and assessing. Compliance is not something that's static. It creates a lot of opportunities in your business. It has a lot of interplay with things like safety and productivity. And so it's really a continuous improvement journey that all good operators should be on. And that means involving your people. Rather than something that's done to them, it can be something that's done with them. An example of that from the other day was a company that was rolling out Guardian seeing machines, which is the driver facing camera that monitors for signs of fatigue and intervenes in real time. And this company was rolling it out, and they said to their staff, okay, we're going to get representatives of the drivers in, we're going to do this thing. Help us figure out how we change our fatigue policy. Okay, what do you think we should do here? How would this be practical? Could we try that? And just the fact they did that change with the drivers, they got a lot less resistant and a lot greater compliance with the policy and procedure that they put in, because people had been part of the journey. And I think that was a fantastic outcome in that company, but a really great way of reviewing your policies, making sure that they're still fit for purpose, and looking for better ways to do things. The final point that I had in all of this is about doing a reboot. If you know that your business is non-compliant in certain teams, certain pockets, with certain individuals, don't let it slide. It's really important that you act on that information. And some of the ways that you might think to do a reboot, for example, someone on this call today does an annual toolbox where they get everybody off the road and in, and they go, right, reset, here's what we did last year, here's what we've learned, here's what we're going to do this year. They get industry speakers, they have the guys hear from the leaders, get an update on how the business is going, and it's a reset to start the season on the right foot. You might like to do that in a toolbox. For example, you may relaunch a policy or procedure and say, hey, look, things aren't going great in this space, so we're going to go back to basics. We're going to run through and retrain everyone on what the expectations are, and then we're going to put a plan in place to really improve in this area, which is something that I've been working with a customer on around mobile phones. They were having 700 events a month, and they said, this is not acceptable, we need a reset. And we have just run a pretty major campaign, re-educating. We did focus groups with the drivers. We got feedback from the drivers around why people weren't compliant. It was an anonymous process, and that's been a significant change in their organisation. So yeah, don't be afraid. A dramatic reboot can be a really successful technique. All right, so that's it for today. As I said, first webinar of many for this year, trying to keep them short and sharp, sticking to the half an hour. We are putting out a plan for the rest of the year, so you'll be able to register for future topics if you're interested. We will be making the recording available, and we'll also be putting it out in audio form so you can listen to it as a podcast. But if you have any feedback for us, my email address and phone numbers here on the screen. Love to hear your ideas. Happy to cover different topics and make sure that this content and information is super relevant for you guys in your role. We will be having a number of guests as we go through the year, so it will not just be me speaking all the time. We'll be getting subject matter experts in the future sessions. So that will be really exciting, and look forward to sharing that with you soon. Thanks to everyone who joined this session today. Really appreciate your participation and fantastic to have you along. Thanks very much, and speak to you next month.